Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius on a not-so-victory Monday. I am John Ledyard from PewterReport.com. With me today on the show is Kasey Hudson of PewterReport.com. We're actually kind of excited about this show, Kasey, despite the fact that the Bucs were losers yesterday, because today is the day where we get to take everything, all the overreaction and all the stuff people talked about, all the venting from last night's post-game podcast, which if you haven't listened to and you need to hit pause on this one, go back and listen to last night's podcast, vent it all out, get it out of your system, because today we're looking at everything. We're pulling back the layers on all the ugliness, the 5-7 worst things about the Bucs this season. And we're saying, are they sustainable or are they not sustainable moving forward for this franchise? So I'm excited about it. Have you recovered from what you saw in yesterday's performance?
Somewhat. I'm excited about it too, though, because I think it's therapeutic. Like, we got to react yesterday. Now we get to kind of dive in a little bit further, look at the things that we may have overreacted on, or, doesn't need as much attention or might need more attention. So this is the good part right here. I've calmed down a lot more since yesterday. I started to rewatch part of it and got a little worked up again. And then I was like, don't do this.
I hear you completely. I just downloaded the tape and I'm excited tonight. It'll be my night tonight. We'll be digging into it, but it's always important to bring back and come back to the context. The elements might be true, of a specific game, but can we come back to the context and look at the big picture again in the past and moving forward, how it looks for the Bucs? And we'll do that today on today's Pewter Report podcast, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at Celsius. Celsius powers active lives every day with essential functional energy. They've got unbelievable flavors: Fuji apple, pear, the orange, the wild berry, the kiwi, guava, the watermelon. And I've got the Peach Vibe Sparkling White Peach Edition here with me today, sustaining me through this day after a relatively sleepless night. I'm excited about Celsius because of the fact that the more people I know that try it, the more people that love it. Get on Amazon, get your subscribe and save going, get yourselves the best energy drink that is out there coming to your door each and every 2 weeks. You could say, I know some people that go every week and they need them that fast. Yeah. There's no sugar in these things. They accelerate metabolism, burn body fat. They are in the flavor too. The taste, how good it tastes is probably the most remarkable thing, especially because you consider that they're take out all the bad stuff and the crash that you get from other energy drinks because of it. So go ahead and check. You can check out Celsius a couple of different places. You can look at Celsius.com for store locators near you to find out where it is. It's becoming more and more prevalent in lots of different places. Or you can go click on the banner ads at PewterReport.com or go to Amazon and you can use the subscribe and save function to get it sent right to you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fast protein bars from Celsius as well. These are the best tasting protein bars I have ever had in my life. I was pretty much an energy drink virgin by the time I tried them over at Celsius. I was not at all with the fast protein bars because I tried lots of protein bars before and it was really hard to find one that actually tasted good and was good for you. These taste unbelievable, and they got 20 grams of protein in them. I had one today. It was my breakfast. It was actually pretty much my lunch as well. And 1 gram of sugar in these things. That's it, to 20 grams of protein. And the taste, white chocolate cookies and cream, caramel peanut crunch. It's a cheat code that they found this taste in something that's this good for you. That combination, you just can't find it very many places. So make sure you can click actually the link in the YouTube description to get yourselves some fast. You can get the variety pack, both of these flavors you see up on the screen. Get yourself some fast protein bars sent right to you, man. You will not be sorry that you did. Okay, Kasey, we've got, full slate of topics today and conversation. The chat is already blowing up. Should we jump in here on some of these comments from listeners, from viewers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
I think it's suitable for our starting point too, because I think this is where fans are going to really need some time.
Yep. And we'll ask fans to answer with us too. We'll ask them, fixable or not fixable? Like, what do you think in terms of what the Bucs issues are moving forward? Paul says extremely fixable. We know Paul's all over the tape. He's always studying up the tape. He says, will they fix them? I don't know. We'll see. But how about them refs? Of course, people want to talk about the refs. We vented out the refs. If you haven't checked out, PewterReport.com has probably 8 articles up just from since last night's podcast. Tons of content from Arians, penalty analysis of the team this season, and even looking at some past seasons is up on the site. Paul, JC's game changer column, Scott's 2-point conversion column, lots of good stuff up there. Scott was pissed last night. He vented some more out in the in the 2-point conversion column. So make sure you check that out as well. Nate wants to know, how do you spell Kasey's last name? And I guess he wants to know how you spell your first name too.
All my information, Nate. No, I'm just kidding.
Three times he screws it up. Nate, you're gonna have to
the effort that he actually did all the K's though. He didn't put the C
he did.
In there.
He got all K's, but none of the right versions of your first name. We're gonna keep Nate in the dark. Actually, we're not gonna tell Nate anything. Yeah. Nate's gonna have to keep fact finding mission. He'll have to go on.
Google Nate. You were so close on one of them, though.
That's right. Okay, let's talk about these issues, Kasey. And are they sustainable or are they not sustainable? Do they actually stand a chance of taking away and subtracting from the Bucs' efforts to repeat as Super Bowl champions? Or are they more like a bump in the road thing right now that the team can fix and probably will fix, or probably will see some regression as the season goes on? Let's start with penalties. We saw 11 of them for 99 yards in this past game. The Bucs have more penalty yardage than any other team in the NFL against them this season. They've also benefited from less penalties than all but one other team in the NFL this season. So the penalty situation, what happens with it, Kasey?
Terrible to think of. Well, so I would almost say the bright spot in it is that penalties was an issue last season. And then after, an embarrassing loss, they found a way to turn it around and have one of the cleanest games ever. The problem is the consistency of it. You would have thought that returning 22 starters and all the hype of these guys being on the same page, having a training camp together, all this stuff would have minimized it. So I think it's a fixable situation. It's just like these conversations happen every post game. We ask Bruce Arians, what about those penalties? And then he says, we're going to get back to the basics or working in practice. And then comes another loaded penalty game. That's the only part that's kind of nerve wracking, but you've seen that they can turn it around before. And if you know that that's going to be your Achilles tendon, then why not?
Right.
I don't know, put that much effort behind clearing that up. I don't know if it's because there's been so many changes when it comes to the Bucs having to, be so flexible with people playing, people not playing. And then I think that has a tendency to get in these guys' heads, maybe make them a little jumpy, but I don't think it's anything long-term. I don't think it's anything that's going to keep them out of playoffs or cost them the season.
I tend to agree for the most part. I think there's one thing, pre-snap penalties Desmond brings up here. That's the key part, right? The Bucs have been posed by some bad calls. They also haven't played as disciplined as they should post-snap. Those issues can be cleaned up. Some technique issues can be cleaned up. Veteran team, I think it will get better as the year progresses. There's just no way, even if it don't get better, that they keep getting called at the rate that they are. Like, the Bucs are getting called penalties on them at a tremendous rate. Like I said, second most penalties in the league for any team so far this year. What's also crazy about it is that they aren't benefiting from calls either. As I mentioned, only the Ravens have benefited from, I think, one less penalty called than the Bucs, and same thing with penalty yardage. The Ravens are the only team with less penalty yardage given to them by calls other than the Bucs. And so the Bucs are kind of on that end of the spectrum too, that even if they maintain their current penalty rate, which seems unlikely, there's almost no way that they keep getting as few calls against them, against the opposition, as what has happened so far this season. So at the very least, things will start canceling each other out rather than being as lopsided as it is. And if that happens, then I like the Bucs' talent to win out in the majority, if not all, of the rest of their matchups this season. So that's one thing to look at too. But Desmond brings up pre-snap penalties, and that's interesting because I've got some really disturbing stats that I'm going to read to Kasey.
I know. I was gonna say, there's like a really disturbing percentage on their pre-snap penalties that I had written down. But okay, so who is this mostly getting kind of called back to? Like, is there a resounding name? Huh?
What player you mean?
Yeah, like who does this keep getting drawn back to? Because then at that point, it's like you got to dial in a situation at some point.
Can you isolate the issue? Yeah,
exactly. So if you
really can't, though, that's the problem.
That's the scary part. If you can't isolate the issue, then you have a little bit of a larger problem on your hands.
You do, because it's harder to cut out. Like, if one guy just keeps jumping offside, you could bench him, or that one guy could fix one variable is easier to fix than multiple variables. But unfortunately, that's not been the case. It's pretty much everybody in their defensive line, and it's been going on for ages. This was startling to me, not necessarily surprising, but this is the first time I actually sat down and studied it, I would say. But Tampa Bay leads the league in pre-snap penalties with 23. They added another 3 pre-snap penalties on Sunday. The vast majority of the issues for the Bucs have come on defensive offsides and neutral zone infractions. That's nothing new, as the Bucs led the NFL with 11 defensive offsides and 14 neutral zone infractions last year. In 2019,
10 right now.
they're at, what are they at right now?
10 defensive.
No, 5 defensive offsides and 3 neutral zone infractions. So they're already at 8 combined. So they're on pace to be close below the neutral zone infraction mark, but above or around the defensive offsides. Because in 2019, also under Todd Bowles, the Bucs led the league with 15 neutral zone infractions and were 7th worst with 7 defensive offsides. This year, 5 and 3, it's still been an issue. Offensive false starts have been an issue, but not really one player. In fact, a ton have been not on the offensive line. A lot have been wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, as we saw with Ronald Jones yesterday.
Yeah.
It's been that kind of stuff. So, but in some ways, Kasey, like, how often are you going to suffer false starts from wide receivers and running backs over the course of a year? It's just not going to happen very often. Most of the time, those guys are not worried about getting out of their stance super early. So even with the pre-snap penalties being stuff that they can absolutely control, I still don't see this being an issue, especially to the point that it derails them the rest of the season. The Bucs are too good to let 5-yard penalties stop them. We've actually seen them overcome a bunch on offense. I think they overcame several the other day in the game offensively against one of the best defenses they'll face all season. I don't think it's going to be a debilitating issue for them the rest of the season. It has been in a couple games to this point. But this was really, like the Bears game, probably the first one where it really kind of cost them the game. And I don't know that that'll happen a lot
too.
Yeah.
That's where they kind of end up really shooting themselves in the foot, is that it's one thing to get a penalty against yourself that sucks. It's another thing to get it in crucial downs or in crucial moments where you need it. And then you end up just kind of having to turn the ball back over. So, I mean, I think in yesterday's game, the Tampa only really got through 58 plays versus the Saints like 72 plays or something like that. So
I think you're right.
You're also
76.
giving them, you're also giving the other team so many more opportunities to just beat you with these penalties. So definitely something that needs to be fixed sooner rather than later, because I mean, we're at that turning point of the season. But like you said, if it's not always the O-line, then these are things that they could somewhat narrow down a bit more talking to these guys, or I don't know what they need to do.
Right. Chat, sound off. Do you think it's fixable or not fixable in terms of the self-inflicted stuff for the Bucs, in terms of the penalties, especially fixable or not fixable? Will it derail the season or not derail the season? Paul has some points here. Even with the bad calls, the Bucs cleaned up the calls that were clearly self-inflicted. They win that game. Completely agree with Paul there.
Yeah.
The margin for error with the Bucs is huge. It's nuts. Agreed. This is a team that arguably is not even, I mean, a lot of games this year, they have not played anywhere close to their potential. Right. Lots of self-inflicted stuff, and they're still 6-2, and they're still, in this game had a ridiculous, they even had chances to win the way they gave away yardage and opportunities and the ball. And so, they can make a lot of mistakes.
Handed the Saints that game. So I completely agree. I don't think they've played their best football yet.
Right. I agree with that completely. I agree with that, especially offensively. They are just like, I mean, they're always kind of, some games they've played really well, but they're just, everything's kind of like right there. And if they just, didn't drop the ball or didn't commit a penalty, or, they have kind of the system, I feel like, really kind of figured out. We will get to one issue with the offense maybe in a little bit that I might be a little bit concerned about. All right, let's move on to number 2. So number 1 was penalties. I think the consensus in the chat is that it's fixable. It's frustrating in the moment of a game, but ultimately long term, that's rarely a thing that prevents a team, especially a team as talented as the Bucs, from recognizing their potential in when crunch time and the playoffs and those kind of things. I don't think it's going to prevent them from that. Let's talk about this element number 2, coverage from the secondary, especially, let's say, and cornerback play, which actually ties into one of the other ones, because health is one of them, and we're going to get there with health.
Yeah. It'll all bleed in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you could say. Here's my thing with coverage and cornerbacks, Kasey, and I'll let you kind of formulate what you're thinking too on this. But my biggest thing with cornerback play, that being, yes, I think it's a concern moving forward, but maybe not in the way that everybody else does. Like, I know people are ripping Ross Cockrell for last night, and he got beat on a touchdown, and Pierre Desir, he got beat on the 38-yarder and missed a tackle on Traquan Smith. And it is frustrating, but like, Kevin White was the leading receiver for the Saints with 38 yards. Like, they just, no receiver has really gone off on these guys. And I know they haven't played great quarterbacks, they haven't played great receivers, and that's why I have it on there as an issue moving forward. Like, it's a question mark, especially we'll see what happens with the health situation. We'll get to that in a second. But if the current group right now had to keep playing, I'd have it as an issue moving forward. They've actually kind of survived the situation really well. I mean, defensively, they've improved every single week in terms of the amount of passing yards against them, like in terms of what they're giving up to opposing quarterbacks, and especially from wide receivers. A lot of the production has been tight ends and running backs or receivers underneath the middle of the field, and not a lot on the outside. Definitely not a lot of big plays. You know, the 38-yarder was really hurt them, but those have been the exception rather than the rule against this Bucs team this year. They prevented big plays really well.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great point because realistically, if you think about, you know, the timing of which they had of when they had to step up, the teams that they have played against. And I will say Ross Cockrell has been progressively better. He's stepped into the role a little bit more confidently. The hard part with it though is like they've had a few games where they've had to mark they've had harder targets to work against, and they did a bit, you know, they did okay for who they are and what they do. So I think it was just expected that they wouldn't let, you know, Kevin White. Like the worst thing you can hear as a fan watching that game is the commentators go, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, but Pierre just gonna let him blow past him. So you got this guy that, you know, has come off as a no-namer who barely does much of anything, who hasn't had much production in 2 seasons. And then he's going against Pierre, who did, you know, well the past 2 games, and then it's not there. So right. I think like where you're coming from, it's obviously valid, but in the same sense, it's like, it's been a couple weeks now. It's time to see something a little bit bigger. Are these guys okay with just being 3s and 4s for the rest of, you know, their career? Or do they want to kind of increase and show that they have the ability to maybe step into a 2 slot? I don't know. So I kind of struggled with that one. That play is where I was just like, I already wanted to turn off the TV, but I really wanted to turn off the TV.
No, I hear you. There was some frustrating moments. I will say this, Desir did have that play where Juwan Johnson trying to come down with that jump ball, and he kind of stripped it out on the way down. It was a good play on a deep ball. I don't remember what ended up happening on that drive. I'll kind of see it as I review the tape, I'm sure. But there's been moments from all these guys that have been good. I mean, Delaney, you know, you never thought saying
that was a good moment.
Not from yesterday.
No, because realistically, he got up, he started celebrating, and to some popular, some unpopular, I tweeted right away. I'm like, calm down, Pierre. Like Johnson basically had the ball because it looked like he had a lot more control.
He probably could have squeezed it. Yeah,
he could have. He could have.
If he was a better player.
It's just like it was nothing to celebrate, in my opinion, for him. So that just kind of goes, you know, under the tally of the White situation. Now, if you don't have the speed on you, you don't have the speed. You can't really hold that against a player if it's not a speedster. But then it kind of goes into another issue in that category of like making your tackles, wrapping up. Like these guys have so many missed tackles out there, and it's just it's hard to watch. It's painful.
Yeah, that is a big issue, and we'll talk about that in a second too. I will say this about secondary. I do think it could be a concern moving forward. I don't think it's been a big part of why they've lost so far. Like I know it's a common concern, so I put it out there. There have certainly been moments that it's hurt the team where they didn't have enough talent in the secondary. I do think those moments have been few and far between, but when they face better quarterbacks, it's going to be an issue again. When they face better passing offenses, which may not happen for a while, to be honest, Kasey. I'm trying to look at the schedule right now, but I mean, Washington, the Giants, the Colts, I guess, but we'll even see if Carson Wentz is still kicking at that point. We'll have to see, and we'll see what they look like really at that point. The Falcons in December 5th, you know, but that's a ways off. By that point, you're talking about different personnel in the secondary for sure. So we'll see what happens. Bruce Arians did say today that it seemed like he was pretty encouraged by the progress of Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Scotty Miller. He didn't mention Antonio Brown, but Ian Rappaport reported yesterday he thinks that Brown will be back. So I would say, I think that's a good sign for the secondary. Here's my last point on that, Kasey. I'll be more worried about the secondary. Yes, I never thought I'd say this. I'll be more worried about the secondary moving forward if they bench Jamel Dean and start Sean Murphy-Bunting over him. Like Jamel Dean has gone out and earned the opportunity to start across from Carlton Davis. It needs to happen when Carlton Davis returns. He's hardly given up anything. He's been the team's number one corner. No, I know it hasn't been against great quarterbacks. I know it hasn't been against great wide receivers. He has done his job extremely well. He's made plays on the football. He's been a shutdown guy. Carlton Davis plays on the left side. Dean plays on the right side. Sean Murphy-Bunting is the nickel when he comes back. But Jamel Dean has earned that right to be out there for more opportunities, no matter how much the coaching staff loves Sean Murphy-Bunting and his energy and his vocalness. I know they love him, but he has not ever had a stretch of play as good as what Jamel Dean has had since Sean Murphy-Bunting and Carlton Davis went down. that has to be recognized. That has to be rewarded, in my opinion, especially when what we've seen from Sean Murphy-Bunting has been a roller coaster at best. And, and he had, two good games really in the playoffs last year that deserve praise, but overall he is still, he's volatile at least, Kasey.
I can't disagree with you, only because I feel like the Bucs, I feel like they're still on the high of Sean Murphy-Bunting from 2019. I think he had maybe like 50 something tackles, but 3 interceptions. He was a younger guy. That was very spectacular for him. They wanted him to carry that momentum into 2020. Now he had 70 combined tackles in 2020, but 1 interception. So I think they're holding out to give him the opportunity to be, who they thought he was going to be in 2019. But I do agree that Jamal Dean, he's doing very well. He's getting progressively better game by game. I think in his situation, it would be a negative move to pull him out for Sean Murphy-Bunting, because if you allow him to continue to step into that role, he's only going to get better, I think, because last year he showed strides of, I could do good things. And then he was pulled from the lineup, or he was, placed down and stuff. So some of these guys, you got to give them a streak of consistency so that they can actually rise to the occasion, or show you what kind of player they can actually be. So right. I agree.
Yeah, I think exactly right. I think that's what Dean's done. He had an opportunity. He seized it. He's played great football for several weeks now in a row. I think he just needs the opportunity to keep playing. And if he struggles, sure, then hook him and you put Sean Murphy-Bunting in there, and you move forward. I mean, he plays more snaps. You're going to play a lot of the game in nickel anyway, and you can play more of it in nickel if Sean Murphy-Bunting's your nickel rather than Ross Cockrell, who's not as good a run defender. And so that needs reality.
Sorry, I said another reality of the situation is that we don't know what kind of player Sean Murphy-Bunting is going to be coming back from this injury.
That's true too. Yep. Yeah, 100%. He's missed a lot of time. I mean, he was first couple of minutes of the second quarter, maybe, of the first game of the year.
Yeah, right at the top of that Cowboys game, and then that was a wrap. So to miss a lot of time, for people to, still be kind of trying to find the heartbeat of this team leading into the most crucial part of the season, we have no idea what he's going to look like coming back from that injury, or what his confidence level is going to be. Because, OJ Howard, he was somewhat, he had a slow start on his return, didn't look very good, didn't look very confident. And then, finally had a few games where he started to get his feet underneath him. So I would think it would be a mistake to pull Jamal Dean when you don't know how Sean Murphy-Bunting is going to be just yet.
Right. I agree with you for sure. I think that's something that will be worth monitoring how the Bucs handle it, because we know how we see it. I think it's a point that not many people have talked about yet, but I know one we'll be talking about over the next 2 weeks, especially as we get more word on Murphy-Bunting and how he's progressing. I think that will be a big part of this for sure moving forward. Okay, let's talk about our friends over at Living Golf Life, Kasey, because they have some unbelievable products coming out. I'm rocking the hat right now. You can see, well, I'm wearing it backward, but you can also see it. There it is up on the screen. You can see it, the Living Golf Life hat. The ball, they have all kinds of stuff. The polos are extremely comfortable. If you want to get out on the course, blow off steam from this recent Bucs loss, you got to get out on the course during the bye week, right? That's a given. So if you're getting out on the course, the weather right now is unbelievable. I freaking love Florida. But if you're getting out on the course right now,
everybody's golfing this week.
Oh my gosh, it's a perfect week for it. Get out on the course, get one of these polos, get the Living Golf Life hat, livinggolflife.com. You can check out all the stuff they have, or follow them on Instagram at Living Golf Life. Support these guys, great guys, starting a business, have a dream for this thing in the way they want to develop it. And I think they've got some really neat looking products that they're putting out already. And more stuff is on the way too, up on their site at livinggolflife.com. So make sure you check that out. Get invested in what these guys are doing for sure, and enjoy it, and get great gifts too with the holidays coming up. Really good gifts as well. Okay, let's talk about number 3 on the list, Kasey. Health. No, pressure. Sorry. Pressure's number 3. We'll get to health in a second. Well, actually, do you want to let's just talk about health, because we can touch on it really quickly.
And it can
obviously not. I don't think it's not sustaining, right? Because they're going to get healthier after the bye.
Yeah, that's actually going to give them a huge opportunity. But hopefully with yesterday's game, they didn't lose Gronkowski longer than anything, because as most of you guys know, Bruce Arians said he probably should have been playing to begin with. And when Bruce Arians says something mildly, you can probably tack about 20% of panic on top of that, realistically. So I think most of it is manageable. I'm just a little concerned on certain timelines that weren't realistic a couple of weeks ago, how realistic they might play out after the bye week. Is it going to be are we going to get 2-3 players back right after the bye week, or is it going to be another 2-3 weeks realistically? Because the end goal is playoffs.
Right.
Pulling these guys back in, especially for at least the first 2 games, it's not necessary.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think that hasn't been an issue for them so far. This hasn't been the reason they've lost either game that they've lost. I'm not sure, but I will say this. I don't think it's completely coincidental that Antonio Brown hasn't played in either of the team's losses this season. I think that they've played 2 of the best 3 teams that they've played. He didn't play again. So there is, some level of coincidence there and that the opponent's been better. But he is a factor. He is a difference-making player for this team. More so than I even probably thought he would be this offseason when his free agency, more so than anybody did, obviously. Otherwise, he would have had more offers. I know with this legal situation, too, that probably threw a wrench in things. But he's a difference maker for this team and allows them to go 11 personnel a little bit more. If Gronkowski's not going to be 100% the rest of the way or going to be out or something, we don't know. They need to be able to play 3 wide receivers much more often than they have even. And he's a big part of that, so.
And just to think of the 3 different kinds of wide receivers that they are, because, in the 2 games that Antonio Brown was missing, they needed that speed factor. Scotty Miller hasn't been here basically the whole season just about. So, it was even said in some commentary after last night's game, if Antonio Brown was out there and they had that speed factor, it would have helped them seal the deal so much.
Yeah.
He's also one of the wide receivers, and this is something like, I always try to find the right verbiage on, but he's one of those wide receivers that I think has one of the best reads and connections with Tom Brady, because some of the mistakes that I feel like I'm picking up on while watching the game is that receivers are not ready for the speed in which Tom Brady delivers the ball, or they're not, reading him properly on what play that they're supposed to be doing, hence the overthrows, hence the short throws, hence a lot of the routing issues. And a lot of that doesn't really happen with Antonio Brown because he can either match the speed and the pace of the ball, or he just has a stronger connection and read with Tom Brady. So he's a factor in many ways, in my opinion, which hurts them.
I agree completely because he can do so many different things at a high level. Paul says AB is what makes his team unfair. He's way too good to be out and not missed. Agree with that.
Harvinder is him too.
Yeah, that too. Harvinder says AB is Tampa's best wide receiver. Obviously, it's going to be different without him. Sorry, but Evans is not in the same league as AB. Godwin was fantastic last night. Yeah, and I think Evans deserves a shout out too. He did play really well. I know people are upset about, maybe alligator armed a little bit that vertical ball when the play right before the interception. But also, I think he kind of lost track of the ball. I don't think it was I don't know. There's probably a combination of factors. We'll look at it on the tape. I'll take the coach speak and we'll look at it on the tape. That's what I'll do. But
you need to have the tape running over here and you just talking over here.
I do. Hey, I'd love to do a show like that. We're trying to put something together. Maybe we can have a show like that. I'm sure
fans are asking for that already. Yeah. But yeah, I think injuries are kind of putting them out, and they only have 2 losses. So
right.
That's the part that doesn't really sound the alarms, but a really good point with them being able to be more efficient with 11 personnel. They ran 12 personnel how many times without the right tight ends, in my opinion. Cameron Brate he looks like he's either secretly fighting through something or he just doesn't look like he did 3 seasons ago. So you don't even have the right tight ends at the moment, nothing against these guys, to be running 12 personnel and make it effective. So that was a waste for me.
Right. And I agree. Once Gronkowski's out, 12 personnel usage should just go way down. And
gone.
I don't understand why it's a big deal for them to want that happen. Even with Tyler Johnson in the game, he isn't amazing, but he played well. And he is certainly, if he hadn't had that drop, he would have had like an 80-some yard game at that drop at the end of the last drive of the game. Meaningless drop, I know, but he was open. He played well enough, not going to threaten AB, but productive part of the offense for the most part. And it needs to be a factor for them way more so than Cam Brate and Rob Gronkowski. So maybe we tack that onto the concern. Can they play at a more 11 personnel and less 12 personnel, especially if Gronkowski's not as effective?
Yeah, and that is a big question mark next to it, because without Gronk, it shouldn't be something so heavily relied on, because you need the right people there to make that effective. And as you guys know, from the beginning of the season and the first podcast I ever did with you guys, I'm a big fan of 12 personnel, but not just to do it.
But you're a bigger fan of Scotty Miller, who also might be back after the bye.
There we go. They needed Scotty to win this one.
I was going to say, if we're talking about health, let's talk about Scotty Miller too, because he makes a difference as well. So they haven't had him. So
well, yeah, and those deep balls that are 20 plus, 40 plus yards. How many of those has Scotty Miller been on the receiving end of?
Right.
It's those guys who can just throw those surprises in the mix. I feel like the Bucs have just got settled into this predictable pattern, and you have way too much talent to be so predictable. And then whenever you try to shake things up, it's a mess. It really just looks like you should have just stuck to something else. So, health is going to be a huge part in them continuing to win out, which they are going to want to do, obviously, and need to do.
Yep, I agree. And I think that, so we've got three things. Penalties, we think it's going to regress, and we think it's not necessarily going to be a thing that derails the team. Coverage, I think that it's trending the right direction. They've held their own without some of their best players, and now they're going to get those guys back. Carlton Davis, Sean Bunting, we'll see what happens. Maybe that's an issue moving forward, but right now we like the direction it's going. I don't think it's in and of itself detrimental to their cause to win a Super Bowl. Health, obviously moving in the right direction. They could have everybody healthy after the bye week for week 10. We'll see what that situation looks like, but fingers crossed for that. It seems like things are trending that direction. So we'll see. Pressure. That's our fourth one, Kasey. Pressure / blitzing unsuccessfully. Bowles blitz heavy strategy not working. 22 blitzes according to Next Gen Stats. Yesterday, Sunday night.
That was for yesterday?
22. Yeah, that was already yesterday. 22 blitzes. That means I think 5 or more rushers according to their statistics. The way they chart it, and no pressure on any of those blitzes. I think they said it's the most ever in the time Next Gen Stats has been charting since 2016. They've never had that many blitzes without any pressures. There's two parts to this, Kasey, and I'll let you say what you think about what they should do with pressure moving forward. The Bucs are blitzing at the league's highest rate. It's not even close by far. Sean Payton said they knew it. They were prepared for it. They figured it would happen. He did say they were a little surprised they did it right off the bat because in the past they hadn't done it, but they were prepared for it to happen, especially when Trevor Siemian got in there. It's true the Bucs did not blitz Drew Brees that much because there was no point to it. They threw the ball so quickly. But everybody else is getting it basically. And now that Brees is out of there, they were getting it. They were going after Jameis. They went after Trevor Siemian. 22 blitzes, no pressure on any of those blitzes according to Next Gen Stats. The other issue, the Saints and other teams are max protecting against the Bucs like crazy. I think the Saints played 6 offensive linemen and like 16 offensive snaps. Like they played guys up front. It's hard to get through. I don't care who you are as a pass rush group. Hard to get through quickly against that.
And then to see it and keep doing it. That's what I was noticing when I was, rewatching back some of the parts. And I'm like, why are they running it again? Why are they doing this again? That's the part that just kind of, it makes no sense. And then you're just wasting, you're wasting plays, you're wasting opportunities. But the biggest thing with the blitzing, I think we talk about this almost every podcast, one of us on the team in one degree or another, we ask how much are the Bucs going to blitz? And I think before against the Bears, you guys finally told me that it was like 18, they blitzed 18 times and whatnot. And I kind of assumed that they were going to be a little blitz heavy versus Jameis Winston because of his hold time on the ball. But and he's not as quick mobile wise as the other two quarterbacks that they had just gone against. So for me, I was like, okay, this might be an opportunity if you want to be a little blitz crazy. But then when you start seeing that it's not working and you're not pulling off of it, I don't know why Todd Bowles just continues to try to blitz and to blitz as much as they didn't have one sack the entire game. Regardless of the penalties, you had one decent sack. That's terrible.
What we really need, Kasey, because this is not my area of expertise, is understanding blitzes and setting up pressure pre-snap, all this. We need to get somebody on the show who can come on and talk with us about what they're seeing from Todd Bowles' blitzes, because this has been a guy that lives and dies by the blitz and how he gets pressure, even when he doesn't send 5, just simulated pressures, dropping out, all those kind of things. And it's just been absolutely sliced and diced this year by everybody. It feels like he's been solved, basically. And while Bowles has strengths as a defensive coordinator, as much as I rip on him, everything he does is predicated around getting pressure. If he cannot get pressure, his scheme falls apart. He's not trying to win every play, win every down, fight for every square inch. He's trying to get pressure or a sack that makes you have a turnover, or you strip sack, or puts you behind the chains and makes you get off script offensively. That's what his units are trying to do. They're going to prevent the big play. They're going to get pressure. They're going to force you into a mistake. That's his whole philosophy. And it all dies if you can't get pressure, because that means short completions happen. Teams getting winning down in distances, not preventing the big play doesn't matter anymore. All those things, you're not getting the turnovers you thought you were. they've come in bunches when the Bucs have had him this season. It has not been consistent throughout the year. First, six, 7 games last year, pressure was consistent through that Raiders game. It was a factor. And there's not been a sustained stretch like that. It feels like a lot of his pressure packages have been solved. Again, that's not my area of expertise. I need to get somebody on the show, hopefully for next week when we're coming out of the bye, I guess, maybe for next Thursday's show to give us some insight onto that and what they're seeing from Bulls blitz packages, because that is a huge part of what the Bucs do defensively. It hasn't been successful. They are okay at getting pressure with 4, but they're not elite at getting pressure with 4. And a lot of teams are max protecting 6 or 7, keeping the back end check, releasing the back on a pattern. This to me is concerning. This is the most concerning thing to me, I think, about the Bucs, Kasey. I don't know whether this team can get pressure consistently enough to win games defensively, which puts a lot more pressure on offense to be more mistake-free. And especially when they face elite offenses, it's going to put even more pressure on them.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, 2 great points that you made within that, the max protection, because when you're looking back at things and you see that they have JPP, Sue, Vea, and Shaq, the thing that I was seeing versus the Saints yesterday is that they just kept, with their max protection, they were able to create these gaps on the left side. The Saints had so much production on the left side of the field because it always opened up between Shaq and Vea, or even if they switch things over a little bit. So that is a huge issue, for one. For two, it may have done well last year for the first couple of 6 games, but then it all kind of ties back into this health issue. So you don't have a healthy JPP. You don't have, these guys in the same position that they were last year. You don't have them at the same, level health-wise, maybe even athleticism-wise. I mean, you got to look at how much more time Sue has left. You got to look at how much more time, these guys have left and adjust accordingly, because realistically, when they're taking on these max pressures, Sue's taking on double team almost every single snap. That's going to wear down on a guy who probably doesn't have much time left in the league. Right. And there was something else that you said that was just like really, really on point with that. But it's just the adjusting. If you don't have, I know that they have the same starters that are coming back, but I don't think everybody is in the same health and capability that they are. So you can't keep running the same things.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part, is that Vita Vea can physically overpower people, but he doesn't necessarily always get off blocks super well to get in pursuit. He doesn't win pass blockers. He just wins through them. And that literally just takes longer. It takes longer to knock down a 320-pound dude, to go around him.
And there's a difference between being strong and explosive. So depending on certain guys that he's facing off against, if he's not winning on, on the explosiveness and they're getting inside on him quicker, then those 5 seconds right there are all about him just kind of having his duel with the guy in front of him. It's not allowing him to get
It's a lot of hand fighting, and it's not really getting off and affecting the quarterback. And you can kind of say the same thing for Jason Pierre-Paul. He's been a little better recently, last couple of weeks, but Shaq Barrett's really the best one-on-one guy. If Joe Tryon-Chink is going to continue not to play, we'll talk about that in a second. But if he's barely going to play, Shaq Barrett's probably your best one-on-one guy. And, Shaq is a good pass rusher, but he's never going to be an elite athlete or an elite physical specimen. He's kind of the opposite of Joe Tryon-Chink. He has to win on technique and his first step, making sure he times the snap up. Those are the ways that he wins. He's going to win with that and pass rush variety more than he is athleticism or power. So you need to – there are certain matchups he's like this one against Ramczyk that he's never really kind of dominated. And so that needs to be considered when you talk about whether these guys can win on one-on-one. So it's a good pass rush group one-on-one. It's not a great pass rush group one-on-one for terms of the front 4. And so, it's concerning if teams are going to protect with as many as they have and still find completions underneath. That's really where it gets you. Like, you can't be protecting with 3 quarterbacks, or protecting with 7 quarterbacks, 8, 3 guys are en route. Like, 3 guys, you have to be able to cover those guys much longer than this, Kasey. And that's not held up either.
And that just opened up the middle so much. Again, just kind of touching back to yesterday's game because it's fresh. But, when you have these front 4 guys going at it and they're getting tied up with these 6 linemen that they're going off with, and then you've got 3 guys getting open. I mean, again, the worst thing that you can hear is when a commentator is like, who is that guy? 45, I think it was Griffin or whatnot for the Saints, being able to get into the middle. Like,
12-yard gain.
Right. And
that was one where they were dropping people.
The whole D line tangled up, and then you see, everybody else so far drop back, and the whole center of the field is just open all day. Like, Trevor Siemian should have never had multiple opportunities to just Who do I want to throw
Right.
to? When do I want to throw the ball? He had too many of those opportunities.
So is it an issue that will continue? I am concerned about this one. This is the first one of the 4 we've done. I'm actually kind of concerned about this one. Against bad teams, no, I'm not. They'll find, like they did against the Bears, and they'll find ways against Washington, and they'll find they'll get enough to win games the rest of the regular season. But against the good teams and against teams like in the playoffs, now I will say this, Kasey, I thought it was an issue last year going down the stretch. And they turned it on in the playoffs, and they found another level. And a lot of it had to do with coverage. We talk about marrying coverage to pass rush. They changed their tendencies coverage-wise over the last 3 games in the playoffs. They went to more cover 2. They played more press man. It threw quarterbacks off. It made them hold the ball a second longer. It got them uncomfortable. They moved unorthodoxly in the pocket compared to how they were used to work the throws they weren't expecting to go to. And it created lanes for pass rushers. So the combination of those 2 is important. If the secondary comes back stronger, it's possible that there's more success there. There's also no way Devin White's going to continue to miss sacks at the rate that he currently is, which brings us to point number 5, Kasey. Tackling and finishing sacks. What is happening with this? Like, it is egregious.
I think they're closing their eyes right as they're about to set in on the guy. That's the only explanation. They're just I think I've heard him.
Bruce Arians talked about it today. I don't know if you heard his quote. I'm trying to find it here. He said, let's see. He said, here we go. We had some free guys on the pass rush. This was his thoughts on the pass rush. We had some free guys and just didn't get there in time. I think we went for a strip sack and let Jameis out one time. The play got hurt. Should have been a sack. We just have to do a better job of finishing, especially when we're blitzing. The back end has to hold up just a little bit longer too, and don't let those quick throws come out. So it's a combination of the coverage because we're getting guys free and we're getting pressure, but we're not finishing the jobs. I mean, I think he's exactly right. He's exactly right. And I don't totally blame Todd Bowles for this. Some of this is players have to just tackle. Like, that has been such an issue. How many times where they're right there for a sack and they've let the guy get away? And a couple weeks into the season, you're like, okay, whatever. Now we're at this point in the season, it just keeps happening week after week after week. The Bears game, you thought it was fixed. Seemed like they were finishing the job, doing really well. Now, I mean, they still having a hard time finding and finishing on the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it's not wrapping up, and like you said, that's a big part. I mean, wrapping up is a big part of finishing, because you get in these guys' faces or you interrupt them for a second. Well, and then it kind of plays in on too when you play against desperate teams. Like, these wide receivers and these running backs and these quarterbacks are going to be hungry to get those extra yardages in. So I don't know what that's going to take specifically, because I feel like that's been a topic of discussion since at least week 3. Finishing your tackles, wrapping up your tackles, not letting these guys slide through your hands. But yeah, that's the worst part, is to watch so many almost situations, and it's all because a tackle is just not being efficient enough.
Right. Right now, it's Pro Football Reference, so I'm not sure. I don't always agree with some of their stat collection, or I question some of it, I should say. They have the Bucs with the 5th worst missed tackle rate in the league, 53. I would say that's probably around. I mean, they have the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Texans, all is worse than the Bucs. So pretty bad teams right there. And then the Ravens actually is the worst. So that's kind of surprising to me. I haven't seen enough to obviously the Ravens to know whether that's accurate or not. The other thing I'd add about the Bucs is that even when they finish tackles, it's not often impactful tackling. It's one thing to tackle a guy right when you hit him, and this has been better recently, but it's a big problem at the beginning of the year. It's another thing to tackle a guy and let him fall forward for 5 more yards. Like, that's a huge difference when teams live underneath against you.
Absolutely, because they don't have the initial momentum when they go in for the tackle, because a lot of tackles that I've seen too is that they somewhat get the guy, they're on the ground, and they're making that last pull to hold him back. So that's where some receivers are ripping through their grip and continuing to move forward, or they just happen to collapse down. So it's just kind of like, it's just very weak tackling. They're not hitting their mark. And not to give anybody any crutches, I understand that, like, with calls these days, maybe it's concerning, or maybe they're just trying to play as clean and safe as possible. But still, you play defense, you gotta hit the guy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the penalties, you accept them if they happen in those situations. But the biggest thing is, this, no question to me, this one has to be improved. It has to be worked on. Typically, it gets better as the year goes on. And I think tackling has gotten somewhat better for the Bucs, even since like the Eagles game, for example, where it was a problem. Like, I think it's improving. So we'll see. I do feel pretty optimistic about this one getting better, not being necessarily a sustainable issue. I will say this, though, as a pass rush group, it has to get better. Contain has to be better as a pass rush group. Letting quarterbacks outside the pocket cannot continue to happen. And this one, as much as I bang the table for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka to play more, it's on him too. He's got to be better at that as well. He's let quarterbacks get outside a few times on him. He's
had some significant misses.
Yeah, I think that it's understandable a little bit why the coaching staff is probably a little frustrated with that. But listen, if teams are going to throw against you if you're going to put Trevor Siemian in the game and he's going to drop back 36 times against you or whatever it was, like you need pass rushers on the field, man. Like even if they screw up once or twice, you need athletes like that on the field. You can't be playing a dude like that 8 snaps, which brings us to our next point, Kasey. Personnel deployment. This is yours. You shouted this out to me before the show. You said, let's talk about personnel deployment because some of this stuff, who's playing where and who is playing, period, like Anthony Nelson playing 10 snaps to Joe Tryon-Shoyinka's 8. That's bad. That's not things you want to see moving forward.
Not at all. Not at all. And I did, and I know yesterday I kind of harped on Nelson a little bit, thinking that he kind of let up on the play. He did still look like he let up, but granted, Alvin Kamara just, he probably had that one extra step on him speed-wise, and Levante David was not expected to get locked up with that tight end. So there's a lot of question marks next to some of these guys. The plays that they're in on, I wouldn't have had Anthony Nelson in on, that such a crucial 4th down play, even though he has been able to do good things. The biggest thing that I noticed when watching yesterday's game, though, was that I personally felt like JPP had a lot more success when he was lining up on the, did I send you right side or left side?
I can't remember. The defensive left side, I think you said.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you said on the defensive left side. He had a pass deflection too on the left side, I think. He was unblocked, I think, but that's where he deflected both passes.
Yeah, so him playing left side, I thought that he was a lot more disruptive. I thought he was he got a way better read and was able to get inside way better, way faster, because as I mentioned earlier, the Saints were kind of loading up on the left side. A lot of their bigger plays were off the left side. So between how often he's in, regardless of injury, and, where he lines up, and then what happens when Joe Tryon comes into the game where they have him line up, even simple, changes. There was a huge play where Sue wasn't in and Nacho was in, and Nacho just was stumbling around, and it was just kind of like, where are you going?
Yeah.
What's happening on this play right now?
Yeah.
So that's where I get concerned about who's in, how often they're in, and where they're playing at. I know a lot of times we end up talking about, the nickel situation or the secondary or who should be right side, left side. But then even looking in a little bit tighter, that conversation when it comes to JVP, Joe Tryon, and even Shaq.
Yeah. Remember we talked about it with Mike Edwards too. Like, why is this team so insistent on not playing him, even with all the issues they've had at corner? He can play nickel. He's experienced playing nickel. You're mostly zone team, even if you don't think he can play that great a man. Is there a way to use him more, to get him on the field? It hasn't happened. Yeah. Hasn't killed them either, to be fair. And hasn't been a thing. The safety play or nickel play has not killed this team by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, there's been personnel things like that. And Bruce Arians said today, he said, I'd like to see Joe Tryon-Shoyinka play more. And, he's not going to say, he's not going to go to in a game and say that to, I think if it was 20 snaps, Bruce Arians would have been fine. 8 snaps, that's, we need a little bit more from him. And I think he's not going to go to the defensive coaches during a game and say, hey, we need this to happen. But it'll be one of the things that gets evaluated during the bye week. He'll bring it to their attention. He's not going to tell them what they do this. It's not going to be like that. I know fans are going to, but he'll say, hey, can we get some packages to get him on the field more? What's that look like for us? The Bucs did terrific self-scouting last year during the bye. It's encouraging for me that that's a part of their process. Bruce has said that it isn't. But it definitely is, and clearly was last year coming out of the bye. So I don't care really what he says, as long as they keep doing the right things. I'm hopeful that that's a part of it. Don't think this is something that's cost them games. It's not been that egregious. I don't think this has cost them games or even really points much this year, to be honest. I think it's something that could be better. I don't think it's something that's going to derail them long term, though. Yeah,
and not that it derails, but it's like, how many weeks have fans, and not even just fans, media, and whomever else have been asking for more production out of Joe Tryon? It's seeing something and kind of giving it an opportunity to grow or to fail. Like you said, why is it such a topic of discussion that Mike Edwards doesn't get more I don't know, respect placed on his name and more opportunity to maybe show up for the team. And I think the frustrating part, so it's not derailing, but the frustrating part is that those are the kind of risks that you kind of want to take earlier in the season or against specific teams, or, get that out of your system now, evaluate it, and see how that can help or hurt you towards the end of the season. Because for all you know, you don't want to try to figure that out after the bye week and find out that it's not beneficial.
Right. It's important to get into that stuff and get ahead of it for sure, I think.
Timing.
Let's talk about the last thing here, because I think we agree personnel deployment. The thing that really concerns us so far sounds like it's pressure blitzing. Can that be a consistent solution for the Bucs? Because in games they've lost, it just hasn't been a factor. I mean, the Saints and Rams games, it wasn't a factor. Pressure was not a factor in the game in a positive way for the Bucs. Neutral situation pass rate. This is the only offensive thing on our list. I mean, I guess penalties do work both sides of the ball, but this is the only offensive thing in our list. I think you and I are very much on the same page, Kasey, that offensively, this team has done really good things. Do they need to do a little bit more consistent at times? Sometimes drops have risen up. They've actually overcome a lot of the penalties that they've had, but sometimes that's risen up. For the most part, they have avoided turnovers. I know yesterday there were 3, and so people will point to that. But obviously, this team is near the bottom of the league in turnovers, near the bottom of the league in sacks this season. They're avoiding a lot of negative plays. They need to. They've had blips on the radar for sure, where they haven't been as consistent as they should be. Process wise, though, this team has a ton of good things in place moving forward, and they've run the ball way better this year. They found solutions in the short to intermediate passing game way better this year. They finished in the red zone at a tremendous rate. Like I said, they've avoided negative plays. They've still kept hitting big explosive plays down the field at one of the higher rates in the league, while also being more efficient underneath. They're just kind of everything works a little bit better offensively this year. I think there's no question about that. Brady's in the MVP conversation at midseason point. So a lot of good things on that side of the ball for sure. The one thing that worries me is neutral situation pass rate. I had Paul look this up for me because he's the guru on this, but the win percentage for the Bucs, this is kind of looking at situations where it's between like 20 and 80%. So like they haven't been guaranteed to lose or guaranteed to win essentially in these situations. So it excludes like 2-minute drill situations and that kind of stuff. It excludes the final 2 minutes of each half. It excludes if the Bucs were like down big to the Rams. At one point, maybe I think they were down a couple scores. It excludes that kind of stuff where that win percentage kind of dipped below, or when they was up way high and they were just running the football. So it excludes that kind of stuff. It just looks at neutral situations. And the Bucs first down pass rate right now is 46%. That's 21st in the NFL right now. It's fine. It's not good enough. If the Bucs want to be a better offense, want to be a more productive, consistent offense, they need to throw the ball more on first down and run the ball less on first down. That is what has worked for them when their offense has been at their best. The last several weeks, they've run the ball better, which is great, but they've gotten away from throwing the ball more on first down, which puts them in more third down situations. They were in 19, I think, against the Patriots or maybe the Eagles. I'm trying to remember. Way too many third downs. It's a hard way to live.
Eagles.
What's it? The Eagles, was it?
Eagles.
That might have been the one, but in this game against the Saints, I said this before the game, one of the keys, staying out of third downs. Bucs did that horribly throughout the game. Actually didn't matter. They were 8 of 13 on third down. So they had a great percentage on third down. But that's a lot of third downs to be in, I think.
Right.
And a lot of it came because they were just too conservative on first down. If the Bucs can find a way to throw the ball more on first down, that's the only question I really have offensively in terms of stuff that's been consistent issues. Specifically, there's been a play here, a play there. There's been 5 plays in a game, all from different individuals that were frustrating. A route could have been better. Dude could have caught the ball here. Protection has been actually pretty elite, but those things will happen. But consistent issues that you can say, wow, it's coming up every week. Like, this is a problem. To me, that's the only thing, Kasey. I think they just need to be more aggressive on first downs.
Absolutely. I think they need to be more aggressive, and I think it's just become predictable, which kind of works against them. So, they kind of did that for a portion of last season, if not the top of the season, in the middle of the season. First down was always run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And once they realized that it was becoming predictable and teams were locking in on them and it was hurting them to get down the field, then they switched it up. So it's being more aggressive, but it's being more confident. Why do they lack the confidence to go for it on first down and make those plays? Is it because you're missing certain receivers? You should be able to put that on the back of a Chris Godwin or a Mike Evans, depending on what the coverage is that game.
Right. I mean, this is you're seeing teams play two high safeties against the Bucs on first down, daring them to run. The Saints are doing this especially. Paul talked about it a lot yesterday during the live in-game stream, and the Bucs are falling for it. And they're a better running team they were. They're still not a top half of the league rushing team. They're not that kind of team. So do it. You do well. You found ways. They've been better against two high coverages this year than they have single high coverages. That's a huge change and a huge plus from last year. Like you said, they need to trust it, and stay aggressive, and they can find success that way.
Yeah, they had a lot of lack of confident plays, I feel like, yesterday as well. So it's trusting it, like you said, trust it. I would put a little higher percentage on thinking that there was going to be a successful pass to a Chris Godwin on, out of that play than to just not go for it. I can understand not hitting Mike Evans because he usually has a lock in coverage, but he even showed that he can shake it sometimes when he needs to. But you got to try it. You can't just sit here and run the ball every single time, because as soon as you become predictable, then you're working against yourself.
Right. I mean, 2nd and 8, 2nd and 7 against the Saints, like that's is exactly what their defense specifically is designed to like really be able to win in those areas. And Brady did so well on 3rd down. I mean, like I said, to be 8 of 13 against the Saints on 3rd down, that's really what gave them a chance. They had a ton of big plays on 3rd downs, and Brady was excellent in those situations. Protection was excellent in those situations. But that's a process that I think if you follow it continually, is going to undo you more often than not. Malcolm wants to know what we thought of the horse collar call. Guess it was technically correct by the letter of the law, which as the law, according to the NFL rulebook, specifically states defensive players cannot actually touch offensive players when they tackle them. Apparently now you can't grab the back of the jersey, even if your hand's not in the jersey, not in the pads, not any of that. You can't even grab the back of the jersey, at least by their nameplate. It's just ridiculous.
It's such BS.
It's just the rules too.
Some of these technicalities that they're adding to these rules are ridiculous. They have to be from guys who've never played a down of football in their entire life. Because if you think of a player coming at somebody, momentum, you're making a tackle. The last thing you're paying attention to is the meticulous detail of your hand getting inside the jersey or staying on the outside or just like rubbing their back. How do you expect these guys
I get
to do
the inside the jersey thing because you can actually grip and rip them down.
If you're gripping.
But we need a penalty for the freak weird play that happened to Winston the other day. I get that it's unfortunate he gets hurt, but we don't need a penalty for how many times is that even going to happen? Like, it just is so silly to me that we prohibit things in that way. And it's only if the guy falls backward, by the way. Like if he had twisted and turned and fallen down the other way, it never gets called. But if you happen to get him with enough force to pull him backward, then it's a penalty. So it depends a lot on the player.
And if you look at the play, the other thing that I wish would be evaluated with some of these penalties is, again, thinking of what these guys' bodies are doing in the moment.
Yeah.
Devin White's feet were not even on the ground. So he's flying in the air just trying to reach for the guy. And it's not like he had all the security and the strength to dig into his feet, square off his hips, and like yank this guy down. Horse collars that you used to see looked a lot more aggressive and, a lot more physical than just a guy happening to catch him while he's flying midair to make a tackle.
Right. For sure. Completely agree.
Nobody's mad at penalties because the Bucs lost. There was a lot of crap penalties in yesterday's game, period, point blank, against anyone's team.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're right. It's not. I mean, we happen to cover the Bucs, so we're talking about it, but it wasn't just in that game either. I talk about it all the time on Twitter. If you follow me there, I'm always talking about penalties around the league and how egregiously bad so many are. And it's a huge issue until the NFL. I mean, people are actually starting to get so frustrated. I know people that are turn off games and not watching anymore. I mean, I don't know if that'll ever be as big enough issue for the NFL for it to be motivation for them to change anything, but it's horrible what it's done to the product of the game for sure. Just not only the officiating,
but the passer calls. Will Goldstein. I mean, he fell into the guy. He fell into him.
Yeah, and he got his helmet ripped off over his face. But we talked about it a lot on yesterday's show. I don't want to get into too much of the officials again, but I know that it's a problem for a lot of people. I do want to talk about a place you can come and vent all you want about the officials, and it's in Spotify Green Room, where we talk music, sports, and culture live. We do it all. Download it on the App Store, get it on Google Play. You can get in here, you can sound off, you can give your opinion on these things. It's terrific stuff with Spotify Green Room. You can grab the mic, you can take control and say exactly how you feel about the refs, about whatever. You can get in here and have those conversations. You can follow Pewter Report. You get the notifications live when JC goes live to talk about all the things that JC loves to talk about on there. And we'll be doing something. We'll try and do something this week for a free agency on there on Spotify Green Room. If we get a chance to this week, we'll jump in there and have a session and see how many of you have followed us since the last time we've been on there. So download it, follow Pewter Report, and you'll get notified when we go live on that format. Kasey, couple things we want to mention before we sign off today. Couple of the reasons why we think, on top of what we just said, that most of the Bucs' negative issues we believe are really fixable. Some coverage questions, we'll see. Some questions with the pressure and why it's not getting there. That one concerns us, but they're getting healthier. Penalties will regress. I believe in the data that shows us penalties will regress eventually. I think tackling and finishing on sacks just happens. I think some of it's luck. I think some of it they need to clean up, but rarely is one team so much worse than another in that area that it actually ends up, being the difference maker in them winning in the playoffs or something. I'm a little bit worried about the neutral pass rate. I am the situations that they're not throwing the ball enough on first down. I don't think it's enough to derail them, but in a big game in the playoffs, I do think it could really hurt them. So two things we're really kind of worried about there. We'll see about coverage as they get healthier moving forward, but most of the issues are fixable. Most of the issues will get better. And here's the other reason not to be worried about the Bucs. Some of the most important factors in whether a team is good or not, or successful or not year to year, is the play of your offensive line and the play of your quarterback. Those, in my opinion, have been the best two units on the Bucs team this year. The offensive line and the quarterback have been elite, top of the league in both areas. You could argue number one in both areas in terms of their play this season. That's how good they've been. That continues for the Bucs as long as their weapons stay healthy as well. Those guys have been great this season, much better than last year. I just think it's still going to be hard to beat this team if they can be average defensively. They have to get to that point. Yesterday was abysmal. So can they get back to average? When they've won this year, the defense has been average or better. Offense has taken care of business in most every game this year. Patriots game being the one where they really felt like they were shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over again. I think that's got to be the key for this team moving forward is can they get to average defensively and sustain it?
I would agree. It definitely comes down to the defense. I'm not too worried about the neutral zone because I think that, Tom Brady's the kind of person who's going to obviously create that change there or, demand that be changed sooner rather than later. My only fear of leaving it up to the defense just getting average is that, the Bucs have done well with putting points on the board, but you don't want to put it all on an average defense and then the offense isn't scoring as much as they need to. Yeah. It would be my only concern there. But I feel like, they thrive off of one another as well. So the biggest concern right now, all in all, is the defense. They just have to figure out things. They've got to do better with coverages. When these healthy guys come in, they've got to see how they're going to gel and move forward because it even seemed like the chemistry was off. They weren't the same defense, even though they have all the same people last year. They haven't had the same explosion. They haven't had the same fear and effect on other teams for some reason. So if there was a way to find that core group again, having that core group when the injuries, when people return from injuries, then that would probably give me the most security that they're going to be fine down the stretch.
Yep. But I agree. Good points across the board. Let's talk about our friends at Pin Chasers, bowling, food, and fun. You can see the locations for their bowling there that you have the birthday parties, team building, fundraisers, all of it. There's unbelievable specials you can check out at Pin Chasers as well. That food that they've got there, I'm telling you, can't wait to get my family down there, jump into this. Also, the Pewter Report Bowling League. You can contact Matt Matera. Matt@pewterreport.com is his email address. You can send him an email if you'd like to be involved in the Pewter Report Bowling League. Check out pinchasers.net, though. You can get down there. You can get a couple lanes, bring the family down. There's an all-you-can-eat pizza night. I think $11.99. There's all kinds of great stuff going on at Pin Chasers. So check out what they've got going on. Get involved in the Pewter Report Bowling League. Come say hi to the Pewter Report staff. Bowl a little bit. Have a blast over at Pin Chasers and one of their 3 locations that you can see there on the screen. So great stuff from our friends over at Pin Chasers. Kasey, this week, we are off tomorrow on the podcast, but we are not taking off the bye week. We are grinders over at pewterreport.com, and we're going to keep grinding. On Wednesday, everybody's coming on the show. We're doing a Pewter Report roundtable show where we're talking about each Bucs free agent. There's like 50 of them. We're talking about all of them on the show, all the important ones, and whether we think the player will be back next season or not for the team. It's going to be a fun conversation. We're going to go roundtable and see what everybody thinks about how the roster is going to look like after next offseason, at least in terms of their current free agents, what they think the prognosis is for whether they'll be able to keep these guys long-term or not, or at least on the franchise tag. This could be an option for a couple of them. We'll have that conversation on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus comes on. He's the contract expert guy, the salary cap guy that told us last year, the Bucs can bring everybody back. It's possible. And we said, no way, you're tripping, dude. And then it happened, and he was exactly right. So he's going to talk to us about how it can happen again this offseason. And so we'll look ahead to that a little bit. We'll dabble in some current Buck conversation, obviously, but the team's going to be off. We're not going to hear from Arians for a couple of days. And so we're going to talk off season pretty extensively on the show on Wednesday and Thursday. So get geared up for that. You'll have a much better idea about the challenges ahead for the Bucs this offseason and free agency and whether they can survive them and keep this team intact or not. It's going to be good conversation with all of us and then with our friend, Brad over at PFF. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited to talk about that and get into some of that this week as well. And we'll have content up on that on pewterreport.com as well. So it's going to be fun stuff going into the bye week. Stick with us and make sure you're checking out pewterreport.com. There's tons of great articles up there. Yes. So for myself and Kasey Hudson, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again on Wednesday for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.